Back in 1977, a friend and I were hanging out late one evening, and we decided that we wanted to go to the movies, and had no idea what the latest movies were. But as we were walking through the lobby, I saw this poster for this new sci-fi movie that looked pretty interesting. So I convinced my friend for us to go see this one particular movie. Now, back in 1977, I was 17 years old, and I was kind of a little cocky kid, just kind of hanging out, doing my own thing as a teenager. But there was something that said, I think this movie is going to be pretty cool. So we walk into the theater, and from the very beginning of the movie, I knew that it was going to be special. I knew that there was something about this movie that had actually drawn me to watch it. And so, as I sat there and watched this movie, I got to tell you, it pulled me in a way that no other movie ever had. I was so engrossed in the movie, the characters, the music, the visuals. I mean, it was just captivating. I was so captivated by this movie. And so, after the movie, that's all I could talk about. My friends got tired of me talking about this movie, and they said, "Man, I don't know why are you acting like this with this movie?" I said, "I don't know, but there's something about this movie that I absolutely love." And it turned out that the summer of 1977, I saw this movie 23 times in the theater. I couldn't stop watching it. I absolutely loved that movie. And in case you haven't figured it out, the movie was Star Wars. And to this very day, it is still my all-time favorite movie. And so back then at 17, I had no idea what the appeal was, other than the way that it made me feel when I watched it. There was just this feeling of triumphance, that overcoming adversity and just saving the world. It just lit me up inside, and I was just like, man, this is just so amazing. And so now, as I've grown and matured and studied science and philosophy and metaphysics, I've come to understand what it was about that movie that really hooked me, although I didn't recognize it at the time. And what it was is that movie is based on the teachings of a guy named Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was a mythologist who came up with a theory. And he called it the monomyth. And basically what he's saying is that all movies, or shall I say most movies, have a story arc that he called the hero's journey. And he said that there are 12 stages to this journey. And when you look at the movies, that they follow these 12 stages, and they make this circle back where the protagonist goes through this circle on his journey and comes back to who he really is, if you will. And so that theory, the hero's journey, was actually part of the reason, or the guy, George Lucas, who created Star Wars, was a huge fan of Joseph Campbell's. And his movie was based on a lot of Joseph Campbell's teaching and his theory on the hero's journey. And so that was actually what drew me in. And so what I wanted to do is share the 12 stages of the hero's journey, just to give you some fuel for contemplation, because it is my belief that the hero's journey is actually the soul's journey. As human beings, we are a soul. I believe that we aren't human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I believe that these 12 stages are the 12 stages that our spirits go through when we are on the journey to awaken to who we really are. And so these 12 stages I want to share just briefly to give you an idea of kind of where I'm going with this. And so the first stage of the hero's journey is what Joseph Campbell calls the ordinary world. And in the ordinary world, we're trapped in what I call society and cultural conditioning. So that's when we get caught up into our titles and our labels, and we do everything that society says we're supposed to do. Speaking from my own experience, that's where my journey began. I was caught up into the ordinary world of doing everything society said I was supposed to do to be happy, and I was absolutely miserable. So that was the first stage. And then the second stage is the call to adventure. And the call to adventure is when I believe our soul or our spirit wakes up and recognizes that the ordinary world is just an illusion, and that it is our responsibility to wake up to the truth of who we really are. And so we are invited to go on this journey. And in most cases, we don't recognize that it's a journey. But certain things begin to happen synchronistically that guide us along this journey. So the second step is the call to adventure. And the call to adventure, unfortunately, a lot of times can be a painful experience. So for me, my call to adventure was the result of my divorce, my bankruptcy, my foreclosure. It was those negative events that called me, or shall I say, challenged me to wake up and begin my journey. So that's stage number 2, the call to adventure. Stage number 3 is the refusal of the call. So once again, I had gone through a lot of negative experiences in my life. I had heard the call to adventure, had the wake-up call of my divorce and all of that. But there was a part of me that was absolutely terrified to begin that inner process, that inner journey to wake up to who Michael Taylor really was. So I refused the call for a while. And then stage number 4 is what he calls meeting the mentor. And so for me, my mentor showed up in the form of a therapist. And during those really dark periods of my life, I gained the courage to go speak to a therapist because I recognized that I needed some help. And she became the mentor that helped me see all of the challenges, that the internal challenges I had been dealing with without even knowing it. And so she became the mentor that put me on the journey to discovering who Michael Taylor really is. And so stage number 5 is what he calls crossing the threshold. And for me, crossing the threshold was as a result of finding the mentor, which was a therapist. I started doing some inner healing and emotional work that allowed me to move past a lot of the trauma that I experienced through childhood. And so crossing that threshold was about waking up to my emotional, psychological, intellectual self. That's when I crossed that threshold, by gaining the courage to meet the mentor. And stage number 6 is what he calls test allies and enemies. And this is when all the stuff hits the fan. Because when we wake up to get called to the adventure and we cross those thresholds, we meet the mentors, then obstacles are going to show up in our lives. It's just how the universe works. And so there will be tests. And so I was tested. I became homeless for a couple of years. I struggled with finding out who Michael Taylor really was in terms of still needing to do more healing work. So there were a lot of tests and allies. I had some friends that kind of showed up, kind of helped me move through my homelessness and all of that. So it's amazing how this journey kind of manifested itself. So that's number 6, the test and allies. And then number 7 is the approach to the innermost cave. And this is the point where we truly commit to transforming ourselves from the inside out. And this is by far the most difficult thing that I had to do. And I had to be willing to really address some deeply seated emotional, psychological challenges that I had just scratched the surface of with the therapist. And Carl Jung said this, and I think it's really powerful. He says that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. He said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And he says, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And so making the darkness conscious for me was what it meant when I went into my inner cave and crossed that threshold to really move past the emotional, psychological, spiritual blocks that I had inside of me. And so I had to be willing to go through that, and I was courageous enough to do so. And that's number 7. Number 8, ordeal. Ordeal simply means that when we go on this journey, stuff happens. And so there comes a time when you think, okay, I've healed that, I'm finished with that, and life should be great. Well, it doesn't necessarily happen that way. There are more challenges that show up that challenge you to go even deeper. And so that's part of chapter 8. The ordeals are the stuff that continues to show up even though you think you've done all of your healing work. And number 9, when we're on this journey, we get to number 9, which is the reward. And in mythology, it's like when you go on this journey, your reward is to seize this sword. And that sword is the sword of truth that you can use to cut through any obstacle that's in your way. And so the reward for me was getting in touch with my authentic self. Getting in touch with who Michael Taylor really is. And it is definitely a reward because in knowing who I am, I know that I have everything I need to deal with any challenge that may show up in my life. And stage number 10 is the road back. Now, we've gone on this amazing journey, right? So we started here, we're going around, we're coming around. And so we're at number 10, which is the road back. And once we've done our work and we've met our mentors, we've faced our allies and our enemies, and we've approached our innermost cave, and now we're on the road back. And there's this freedom that comes from knowing that we've done all this work. And there's almost an ecstasy in knowing that, wow, I made it through a lot of stuff. And I'm on the road back to my authentic self. And number 11, stage number 11, is what he calls the resurrection. And so if we take all those pieces that I just mentioned and do our healing work and connect with our authentic selves, then in reality, a part of us literally dies. And a part of us literally awakens. And that's the resurrection. That's when we get to the point where we know that, oh yeah, I am a hero. And I can look back at all the other stages and all the stuff that I've gone through, and I can go, yeah, I've earned my hero badge. And I feel good about it. And that's what the resurrection is all about. It's about coming to the understanding that you've grown through this journey and you've become the person that you intuitively knew you were. Which leads us to stage number 12, which is the return with the elixir. Meaning, when we've done all of our work, we've healed our wounds, we've gone through our psychological and emotional process, now we've gained all this knowledge and wisdom about ourselves. And we return with that knowledge and wisdom, and we share it with others to support them on their journey. So we're able to see how this arc that we followed brought us back home to where we began. But what we now have is the knowledge and wisdom to support others in going on their own journeys. So that's just my interpretation of the hero's journey. And as mentioned, the movie itself follows that arc. If you look at the movie Star Wars, everything that I just mentioned, there's an aspect of it in that movie. But even more importantly, your own life follows that arc, follows that circle. And you can call it the hero's journey if you choose to, but I can assure you that if you will take the time to fully understand the hero's journey, it will guide you on this amazing journey back to yourself, back to who you truly are. And so you can do a Google search, just type in the hero's journey, and there's tons of information, tons of books, lots of information on it. Just know that the hero's journey is really your soul's journey. It's the journey that you must take to come back to who you truly are. And when you do, you come home with the elixir of life, and you learn that everything along the journey was there for your benefit. Everything along the way was there to help you become the divine expression of the infinite that you truly are. So think about that. It's pretty powerful stuff. And I can assure you, once you study the hero's journey, you'll see Star Wars in a whole different light. And you'll recognize why the saying that came with the movie was so powerful. And that saying was, "May the Force be with you." Because I believe the Force, the universal intelligence that created this universe, when we go on this journey, we access that force. We connect to that force. And it is that force which will guide us to be, to do, to have anything we desire in life. So, start your hero's journey right now, today. Think about it.